The organisation Undoing Tax Abuse and Water Shortage South Africa are calling for an independent national water regulator. They say this will help to protect water and unblock investment in the sector. They also believe the National Water Department is failing in several of its mandates with regard to water pricing, protection and quality. Julius Kleynhans from OUTA and WSSA CEO Benoit join me now. Thank you both for your time tonight, gentlemen. Perhaps just to put it in context, and I'll begin with you, Mr. Leroy. When we look at the water situation in South Africa, there seems to be not the level of urgency that is needed if some of the research that we've seen come out about the difficulties we're going to face from 2030 onwards with access to water are true.
I think, first thing, the 2030 is not the real number. We have scientific evidence that we ran out of water in 2002, and we've been scraping the barrel since. So we're really operating in a paradigm of scarcity at the moment, and the municipalities are leaking about 40%, national average 37 to 40% in the networks. So there is water available within those networks for us to harness. But the investment in the sector is not taking place. And this is one of the drivers why we're busy setting up the platform for an independent water regulator.
40% of leaks, what became of the department's leaks program? We saw water and sanitation embark on that big national project. Did it not yield results?
It was reported as an unfunded project. A lot of the learners have not been paid. It was done, a lot of it through Rand Water Board, I'm told, which is owned by Department of Water and Sanitation. It's difficult to employ plumbers to fix a 5-meter diameter bulk line. That's a civil engineering issue. And if you look at the city of Cape Town, they managed to take their leaks down from 25% to 15% pre-drought, and they managed to do that in what we call water pinching, so reducing the pressure at night, lower pressure, lower leaks. And the department was, in actual fact, I think trying to address issues in maybe households, but if you're looking at the problems at a bulk level, so what's feeding the towns and then the town's reticulation system where the leaks are taking place, and Johannesburg needs for Joburg Water 11 or 12 billion to stop the big leaks. They are leaking 41 to 45%. They're unsure of the real number because they're not measuring. If you're not measuring, you can't manage, so they have a big number. We need to put in technology with investment in the sector, and we can pinch. If we're losing half the water, and it's 20% of our water that's used by cities, we could save 10%. Maybe that will get us to 2030.
You know, it's interesting you should say that, because when it comes to the cities also, there's also this big question of access. So if everybody in the country were to have equal access to water, would it be enough for all of us?
What is equal access? It has to be done on an egalitarian basis. And to do that, we need to regulate. The Department of Water and Sanitation is the custodian of water. It generates policy, which is politically driven, and then it goes and implements projects. We know there's overspending and the likes, but it needs about 870 billion rand investment to catch up in the last 2 decades of underinvestment.
870 billion rand.
There are some debates that it's R1 trillion, so it's close. It's between 870, 900 billion rand. The cities do not have that money. The sector does not have that money from a government perspective, the fiscus. The money is around in South Africa to do this. To do that, we need to have policy certainty, and the producer and custodian of water needs to be separated in our division of powers, as we've got in the National Development Plan, and have a regulator, as we have in power generation. You have NERSA, the electricity generator. So you can't regulate yourself on what you're producing and the likes. That's the sticking point. So the sector is uninvestable. Policy is not being implemented. It's in the National Development Plan, and the regulator has failed.
Where does OUTA then come into all of this? You've been lobbying on several fronts. What's your position or your interest here?
It's very important. I mean, people pay their taxes for water. There's increased economical issues that's happening in the country, and we don't see poverty alleviated. So We want to see taxes work for the people, and we want to see accountability that thrives for accountable government. The problem is the plans with government is election to election, where you need some sophisticated elements or platforms that ensure something as important as water in the future, that there's no politicking involved, and that we can actually see that our very good legislation that we do have are enforced.
So in terms of the practical to-do list from here on, I imagine that you're not solely relying on the water, or on the Department of Water and Sanitation, because they have their own failures, which even Parliament is aware of and trying to work on. So what are the other avenues that you're exploring?
Look, it's very important. I think one has to look at what's wrong. The Environmental Department, for instance, they've got the Green Scorpions. The Green Scorpions are independent from the department, and they work under the NPA. So these guys can actually enforce legislation independently and hold people to account. Now, the Department of Water and Sanitation has the Blue Scorpions, but they report directly into the department. So that's why you see the pollution in municipalities of wastewater, sewage in our rivers going down the streets. The drinking water quality that's not always up to scratch, and reporting and monitoring not happening, and the access that everyone doesn't have access to clean drinking water in this country. It's 2018. So those are the kinds of elements that one needs to address, and an independent or Chapter 9 institution in our Constitution can actually address this independently and hold people to account and enforce compliance and legislation.
So who do you need to lobby then, gentlemen, in order to get this independent regulatory body?
What we're busy doing is getting the stakeholders on board. So the intensive water users, agriculture is about 60%, industry, which includes the state-owned enterprises like Eskom, and then Sasol, the mines, etc., another 20%. And then the city users use about another 20%. So we're busy formulating a strategy to harness those stakeholders and then put that into what a regulator would look like. So in other words, what do they need to enable the economic stumbling blocks that they have? Because water is an economic enabler, and it's a constraint at the moment, shouldn't be. So we've been busy with that already. We will start in earnest next year, and that will give us what industry needs, what civil society needs, and what agriculture needs, so what we need for food security for this country. And with that, at no cost to government, we will also put together the legal framework, okay, so that government can adopt it and we can push it through Parliament. That's the methodology. There's a lot of detail that will go through that, and we think that will take us around about 18 months to do it, which is the high road. So it's a difficult task.
Of course, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which is a stumbling block currently, is perhaps the political will or lack of political will that ensures that the stumbling blocks in the Water and Sanitation Department continue as they are. OUTA, are you expecting that there would be opposition to a framework such as this, which you are supporting, especially given the kind of tense relationship that you've previously had with the governing party?
So it's very interesting. Look, we always work with government. There's definitely some head clashing, but usually those people don't come to the party, and we've seen a lot of corruption that OUTA has rooted out. However, I do think there might be some misinterpretations in the media. This is not to manage water and withhold it from people and determine pricing that's excessive. In fact, it is to ensure that there is water security in the future, responsibly so. If you look at the Department of Water and Sanitation, you touched on war on leaks. I mean, that's actually a municipal function. It shouldn't have been for the department. It wasn't budgeted for. They spoke about 18 billion rand to do the thing in the beginning. That's actually an MBA degree for each of those individuals, not just an artisan certificate. So it's very important that there's a sophisticated team of specialists that can ensure that government's honest. Doesn't matter who governs, doesn't matter which the leaders are in power, but that the water in this country and the security is sound.
I will certainly wait to see what those final frameworks look like and what the regulatory body could potentially be if, in fact, it goes through Parliament. The OUTA CEO, Julius Kleynhans, and WSSA CEO, Benoit.